Excellent. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Wow. Catching your breath, taking a breath, being accepting, and also wanting to make change. Yes, and how to live your life. Our next guest has also made some yes and decisions about life. I'm going to welcome Dr. Bert Davis to the screen. How are you, sir?
I am wonderful. I'm honored and I'm privileged to be once again in your presence. As you know, I'm a huge fan of yours. And want to start off by saying I appreciate the fact that even before I got here, you have been in the corner of ABHM, America's Black Holocaust Museum, in support of Brad Pruitt and throughout the legacy of our dear founder, Dr. James Cameron. So, because of that, I say thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's one of those, it's been an experience for me where you are just where they say grow where you're planted, to have been planted next to icons and legends like Dr. Cameron, and planted in projects and with people that you don't even realize that they're going to grow up to be these incredible trees. So I'm grateful to be in the right place, to have been planted in the right soil, that I get to watch you carry on this legacy. But before we get into all that wonderful history, kind sir, I appreciate those words. Let the good people know who you are, because I actually invited you to be a part of this discussion for all of your sparkliness too.
Sparkliness. Okay, I'll add that to my curriculum vitae. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Robert Davis. Everybody calls me Dr. Bert. I'm a doctor because I'm a doctor of veterinary medicine. And I have been very fortunate in the fact that I was born and raised in Chicago and had two great parents who believed that my sister and I, my sister 3.5 years my younger, really appreciated the fact that education was going to be the key to our success. And so I'm not going to give you I'm the first of the family who was college educated. I'm third generation Tuskegee University, Tuskegee Institute. My sister also went to Tuskegee. My father and two of my father's aunts went to Tuskegee. And so I grew up as a read avidly, um, voraciously over the weekends. My parents created a scenario where we had to read before we could do our own homework. So just imagine you don't even want to do your homework, number one. Number two, we had to read books like I'm sure most of your audience has never heard of, the Hardy Boys and the Happy Hollisters and the Nancy Drew mysteries. We had to read those, and I'm talking about the entire series before we could even pick up our pen and paper to do our homework. Well, it paid off because by third grade, I was reading at the 10th grade level, and by fourth grade, my sister was reading at the 10th grade level. And not only did we read those books, but we read those books about our history. My parents were avid and voracious readers also, and they believed in learning our history. And so the notion of education starts at the home, it's absolutely unequivocally true. Because if we rely on education only being in our school systems, for whatever the reason we have decided that that is the norm, it's not. And it can't be the norm. So if in fact we know that latchkey kids don't have the structures at home that I had or maybe you had,
Mm-hmm.
then we have to create those structures for them once they leave school that help prepare them to then be equipped to do their homework successfully. All right, so that's another soapbox and another mantra. So please excuse me on that because I'm supposed to talk about me. So I decided in 1976 at the Thanksgiving dinner table, it was a blizzard in Chicago, that I was going to announce to the family that I wanted to become a veterinarian. And so Dad and I already have some really keystone touch points that we're going to talk about later. And so after I announced that I wanted to become a veterinarian, my younger sister said, "Wait a minute, we don't even have any pets. How's it you want to become a veterinarian?" And I was because of my animals. I mean, I loved animals and I love minerals. So I've always had a rock collection. I still have a rock collection now. I'm a self-professed nerd, proud of it. I tell students who I mentor and talk to all the time, every year, elementary school, middle school, high school, college. The people who run the world are nerds. You better get you one. You better become one.
They're running out, y'all. You better get you one. They're running
You
out.
better get you one, and you better become one, or you better get you one. Because the people who put in the work, the people who sacrifice themselves for either their families and themselves or beyond them, who have dedicated themselves and done the work, the hard work, they set the precedent for all of the rest of us who need to do the same thing to become accomplished. You didn't become the poet laureate because you just woke up one day and wrote a poem. You have a portfolio, you have a history, you have a basis for what you have begun when you were young to accomplish what you are now, which is true admiration and success. People need to understand, and especially this generation, that people are becoming millionaires and they never put any musical work. They never spent a day in a studio other than just to do whatever they did and walk out. And we have thousands of people that have learned the craft and didn't get paid a dime for it. Once again, that's another soapbox. So let me get back.
I'm making a list of all these soapbox conversations you
Right,
want to be invited back to.
right. So I went to Tuskegee, historically black college, and I actually loved it. I want to say a couple things about historically black colleges, and that is we are creating, recreating, and now we're being recognized for the talent that has dwelled within, come from, been trained by HBCUs. Most especially our current vice president, Kamala Harris, is a HBCU grad from Howard who's an AKA, right? This demonstrates the prowess of historically black colleges. I can't put enough emphasis on that. Secondarily, what we've realized through years is because we were not allowed to go into the majority institutions, that we had to create our own. And so historically black colleges trained all the doctors, all the lawyers, all the veterinarians, all the engineers who sought extra degrees, post-secondary degrees. They couldn't go anywhere else, so they had to go to these HBCUs. We churn out and continue to develop all of these great minds. And so I was privileged to go to Tuskegee. And it was there that I really learned a lot about myself. Um, it is where those of us who learn about the tenets of college is that college is basically a couple of things, and we can argue back and forth. First and primarily, it's where you learn really how to learn for the rest of your life. It gives you the fundamental building blocks as to how you're really going to learn and adapt to life for the rest of your life. Secondarily, it's where you're going to create most of the major relationships in your life is in college. Almost all, invariably, all my best friends I met in college, for the exception of a few that I still talk to in high school. And thirdly, and most importantly, they are colleges, regardless of the nature, are really the foundation for sustainability of those areas in which they are located, but also a sense of connectedness, whereby you could see it at the level of NCAA sports for the majority schools and homecomings for HBCUs. They are places that we reconnect, that we understand that we have a commonality as it relates to going through what we went through during those times.
Most definitely.
All right, fast forward because I know we're on a time schedule here. I left Tuskegee and started before I left Tuskegee, finished undergrad, graduate school, veterinary school. I taught, and then was fortunate enough to go to the Smithsonian, which is an honor that has basically helped to craft the rest of my career. I went to the Smithsonian as a research fellow that was supposed to be there 18 months, and I ended up being there 6.5 years and was a supervisory veterinary medical officer when I left. Was the first and only Black veterinarian to actually go to the Smithsonian as a fellow and then join as a staff member. And it just gave me an opportunity to really understand the broad array of access that the Smithsonian has around the world. It is the largest museum complex in the entire world. And it allowed me that access. I traveled the country, I traveled the world on behalf of the Smithsonian.
You
And
see this face? I'm sorry to interrupt. You see this face? As a veterinary research for the Smithsonian Museum, what were you looking? Were you curious? What did you do?
I was fortunate in the fact that I had a professor who loved me, and I loved him dearly.
Okay.
And he went to a conference, the American Association of Biologists in Virginia, and he met the the office the director of the Office of Fellowships and Grants of the Smithsonian at the time. Her name was Roberta Rubinoff. Her nickname was Bobby. And he said, "Hey, I've got this young guy. He's Black, and he really wants to work with exotics. And he's bright, and I think it's someone you should take a look at." And her reached out to me in 1990 and said, "Hey, we met one of your mentors, and send us a proposal. Possibly could lead you into doing a research fellowship. It's only going to be for a few months because these research fellowships are only for a few months, but it'll help your career." I was like, "A Smithsonian fellowship? Yeah, I believe so."
Yeah, I'll do whatever. What, staples removed? I got you. I got you. I'm on it.
What does it do? So I did, and ended up in the Department of Animal Health, which is, of course, where I wanted to end up because I'm a veterinarian. And it was interesting because the work that I ended up doing was around a genre called therogenology. Therogenology is the study of how we can enhance animal reproduction through and via reproductive technology. And so and this was very, very interesting and very important. During those times, during the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, research institutions were being slammed because we were using laboratory animals for our research. This was contrary to that. We actually were using success in human in vitro clinics to apply to endangered species. So we were doing artificial insemination, in vitro fertilization to help endangered cats. So I was part of a team that helped to create the first IVF and AI tiger, cheetah, Florida panther, clouded leopard, snow leopard, and lion. And so this was a breakthrough because we were transitioning zoos from being zoos as we understand them to become what we call frozen zoos, where we actually could artificially inseminate a male. And that was my area as part of the research team. And then you could instead of moving, so let's say that a female rhino here at the Milwaukee County Zoo, because of the genetic research that zoos and aquariums were involved in, which was called the Species Survival Plan, the SSP, said that we needed to breed this female here in Milwaukee to an animal, to a male at St. Louis, instead of bringing the two animals together, which is a whole deal. You can imagine can you imagine dating on the large animal scale, right?
I'm just thinking it's like Tinder for big
right?
kids, what you just did. So you were Mr. eHarmony for these.
So instead of doing that, though, we would collect the sperm from the male in St. Louis and artificially inseminate the female here in Milwaukee. And so there are several zoos now that are employing those techniques, and it has saved hundreds of species from extinction. All right. I then decided that it was enough of doing that, which I love, but what changed my life, the reason I'm sitting here now, is because instead of staying on to be a zoo veterinarian, which at the time when I was there and when I left, there were only 2 Black zoo veterinarians in the entire country. I was taken by and affected by the fact that young kids, especially young kids of color, had never seen anybody who did what I did, who were able to bring in keepers and keepers with animals to talk about these animals. And the profound change that we evoked from these children because of animals. The medium of which we appreciate nature is through the lens of animals. And it was something that I didn't realize at the time, but I realized immediately that was important. So there were a few stories that I'll reference. And one of them was, no matter what schools I went to, wherever I went around the country, there were always these reticent students who really didn't say very much in class. And they really, quite frankly, were disinterested in education. And when I came there, we talked about animals. We did this whole slideshow around guess who these animals are, and they were jumping up and down. And like almost to the visit, inevitably a teacher would come to me and say, little Bobby over there, he never talks. Susan over there, or LaQuisha, or Abdul over there, they don't ever talk. They were jumping up and down about these damn animals. Like, what in the world is this about? And it was because everybody loves animals, because everybody appreciates nature. And so I realized that was a tool that I could use to educate kids. So I got out of veterinary medicine, which made a lot of my colleagues mad. A lot of my mentors were like, why would you do that? Fast forward, I got into education and administration, came to Milwaukee to run the Zoological Society, left here to go to be the CEO of National Mississippi Museum, Aquarium, and Historical Society, became a consultant around diversity, equity, ability, and inclusion, which is something very dear to my heart. And then was called back to run America's Black Holocaust Museum. And so a lot of my colleagues would call me, because I know we've got other stuff to talk about, and I've talked way too long. And they would say, why are you going back to run the Holocaust Museum? Like, what is that? And when I told them the Holocaust Museum was founded by Dr. James Cameron, who's one of the only known survivors of a public lynching, the only person to open a museum around race and his experiences and to write a book about it, to the person, they said, oh, and how did I not know? So that's why I'm back. And that's
why I'm back.
Invariably who I am.
I don't even know where to start. I have many, many questions, but I actually want to take it back full circle to where you started in framing your experience as someone who was absolutely reared on knowledge, who was fed information as something that you sought out for yourself. And there's a whole cycle of being the Black kid, being the nerdy kid, being the nerdy Black kid. And then you get to go to Tuskegee, a campus full of nerdy Black kids who are also have received the support they need for their own excellence. To where you are now, grown up Black nerd who loves information and knowledge and also wielding it as a power. I would love to hear you speak a little bit more about where you stand now and how being that nerdy Black kid got you here. I mean, you told us your story, but that's something that has seemed that I really resonated, one, with me personally, and two, it just seems to be a theme of what has moved you from step to step to step.
So I'm going to go first with the clear delineation of raised versus reared. You use the word reared. So
Hmm.
there is an ilk of us who say cattle are raised, humans are reared. And you use the word reared. I knew we
You
were
got to keep
kindred.
me.
I knew we were kindred. I knew it from the very start. Um, so let's talk a little bit about culture. And so my belief is that culture trumps strategy every day, all day, in every workplace, whether it's for profit or not for profit. Culture trumps strategy. And so when I'm with some of my most intellectual friends here and abroad, and we start, having a cigar and having a bourbon or a scotch, and we're talking about what are we gonna do, right? Everybody tends to shift to our saving grace is education. I don't disagree with that because education is a saving grace. It is a fundamental build, building block for ascension. Excuse me. That being said, if you create a culture around these certain things that are transformed, passed down, traditions that grandmama said, great grandmama said, daddy said, mama said, uncle said, this is what we believe. If you look around the world now, the world is based on, built upon, and actually run on culture, not scholarly works. Just think about what we're going through now where we're trying to tell people to get vaccinated. And they're like, well, I just don't think I should. I don't believe in it. So, what medical school did you go to? Oh, Dr. Fauci, he's just a pawn, and I don't believe anything he said. When did you become an epidemiologist? Can you spell the word epidemiology? Well, I don't believe in critical race theory. Well, tell me what it is. Well, I don't know what it is, but my senator told me I shouldn't believe in it. We're raising a cultural class of idiots. I know if maybe I shouldn't say that. I'm sorry.
Raising.
I'm sorry. We already have some, and they're raising them.
Hmm.
Not rearing, raising. So to get back to what you originally asked, it's culture. My parents created a culture that this is how we're going to behave. This is how we're going to do these things. And it's based upon a melding of my mother's history and my father's history. Now, my parents are 94 and 85. My dad is 84, 94. My mom is 85. You can imagine their culture is where the woman had to be like, well, okay, if you say so. Where my generation, most of my friends listen to their wives. I mean, inevitably, we all listen to our wives. Um, and so
We
that,
welcome that culture shift.
yeah, huh?
We welcome that culture shift. We're just trying to keep y'all alive. We're trying to keep all of us safe. That's all.
I'm divorced, but I still contend that my wife is smarter than I am, and I'm pretty doggone smart. Um, Culture trumps strategy. So when you think about how we've inculcated our culture to then help us become better people, it goes and it harkens back to some of the premises of a lot of our Black fraternities, whether it's all the college-based, the university-based fraternities, whether it's the Freemasons, whether it's the Boule or the Guardsmen. It's about individuals doing what they're supposed to do as individuals that feed into the positive outcomes of the collective,
Of the collective.
of the collective. And
And
so that's what all of this was about. And from my upbringing and my rearing. And so there was nothing that I was taught or that I actually developed in my own character that made me the center of the benefit. The benefit was a byproduct, a subsidiary of the greater good. And I've always
Mm.
believed in that. And I still believe in that now. That's why I'm back here.
Where the idea of the greater good can still be attached to your purpose and your ideal, and it doesn't have to feel, because the language now around greater good is it's a sacrificing of self for something that you presumably aren't going to benefit from. Different from it is a contribution of self to a greater good that we are all going to benefit from. Well, let me ask you this. I want to get your input on this line and also bring all of us back together. I want to be mindful of what else we have going on in the world today. Where did this line take you?
Well, so this was the thing that was so scary to me about this line, because I'm a veterinarian. So you're talking about a broken winged bird, right? I've actually dealt with and worked on broken winged birds. So it went from this guttural kind of oh, I've done that kind of thing, to, oh my goodness, what does that evoke emotionally for me? So I'm going to tell you a story. When I was here before, probably around 2008, 2009, could have been later, could have been earlier. I was in a golf tournament for the university, for Marquette University's business school. And we were on the front nine, and the person I was playing golf with hit an approach shot, and a group of starlings flew across the fairway, and he hit one of them, and they literally spiraled down, boom, and fell. He looked at me and he said, "Doggone it, I hit a bird. I'll be doggone, I hit a bird, and I got Dr. Doolittle in a cart with me." So we drive up, and the starling is fluttering, and I pick it up in both hands, and I pull the wings to see if the wings were intact. I pull them back, I right the bird, and the bird flies away. When I started my career at the Smithsonian, I was going, my first grant was through the Office of Fellowships and Grants. And then my second grant was through the Department of Education, which is now shifted at the Smithsonian on the mall. And I was going to see a couple of people about a grant. We got out of the cab, we were walking to the castle of the Smithsonian, and a bird flew into another bird, and it happened to be a starling. So now this is 25 years ago. Starling is on the ground. I walk over. My colleague says, "Don't touch that bird." I said, "What do you mean? I'm a vet." Pick the bird up, pull the wings out, close the wings, bird flies away. Both true stories. The first time I read that line, I thought about my own experience with birds who've been injured and our perception of their injuries, but the reality of their recovery. What I then thought about was broken bones, especially with birds who have pneumatic bones. That's why they are gifted with flight. They don't have hard or soft bones. They have what are called pneumatic bones. Their bones are filled with air so that they can fly. If they had bones like ours or cartilage like ours, they couldn't fly. Bones that are broken in birds are special bones, which need special attention,
Mm,
which need
mm.
special healing. And so, if we now equate or correlate that to the broken bones of our children, the broken bones of our communities, and the broken bones of our people of color, then we must correlate that to special treatment. And that the stories and the traditions and the cultures of people of color, which has been manipulated to the point that they've been manifest for us to not even appreciate them, it brings me to a place that's not a place of solace. It's not a place of satisfaction. It's a place of there's much work still to be done.
Perfect.